Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I take time to watch birds as I go about my daily tasks. In my show, I'll tell you about the wild birds I've seen, speak with other enthusiasts, take bird walks, and share stories from listeners around the world. My guest this week is wildlife educator, conservationist, and ornithologist Dan Rouse. Dan is passionate about coastal birds and wildfowl. She's appeared on radio and TV, has a great YouTube channel which educates and entertains, and has written articles for many of the nature and bird magazines. Bringing the wildlife of Wales to a wider audience is something she champions, and she presented a talk about Welsh wildlife at last year's bird fair. It was a windy but sunny day at Rhossili Headland on the Gower Peninsula, about an hour west of Swansea, Wales, when I met up with Dan last year. I was suffering from a chest infection that took my voice several times over the next few weeks, but I didn't want to miss my opportunity to take this walk with Dan and find out more about the local wildlife. I got pretty short of breath at times just from the exertion of gentle walking, and my voice was hoarse, so apologies for that. It was a bank holiday, and there were lots of people out taking advantage of the sunny weather. During the walk, Dan gave me tips on identifying various birds, including spotting the differences between Skylarks and Meadow Pipits, Cormorants and Shags, and common gulls and herring gulls.
We've come out onto the Wormshead Peninsula. It's an absolutely beautiful day. There's a slight breeze, which I'm trying to protect from hitting the mic too much. I will just say that apologies, my voice is only just coming back, so it's very weak. So I'm going to let Dan do a lot of the speaking today. But it's a beautiful sunny day. There is some cloud, but the sea's blue and there are a lot of walkers out. So we're going to take a stroll down to the Worm's Head. What do you call it? It's kind of on is it an island?
Sort of, yeah. It's more like a causeway, so you can, when the tide is low, you're allowed to walk across to it. But at the Coast Guard hut, they've got like the high tide time, so you're not allowed between half an hour of the high tide time, because you literally cannot get across.
Yeah, or get trapped the other side, I guess.
Yeah. You'd be stuck with the birds and the seals.
Well, I could think of worse things, but it might not be nice overnight. So we're just going to take a gentle walk down. I'm going to try and protect against this wind because it is a bit strong. Can you just describe a little bit about what the landscape looks like?
It's sort of like cliff top. So on your left, as you walk in through the Rhossili gates for the National Trust sort of reserve, you've got all the farmers' fields on the left, which are brilliant for like pipits, larks, and sometimes the choughs are in them. But then on your right, you've got like the large cliff tops, and that's where you get all the birds of prey like kestrels, peregrines, and also the chough are on this side. So you've pretty much got a good chance of chough anywhere you are here.
That's fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a walk down across the hilltops. It's green grass with gorse, and we'll see what little birds we might see amongst there.
The only problem we've got down here is when you go through the gorse, you've got a high chance of adders.
Oh, really?
The adders, this sort of habitat around here is sort of perfect for them. They have secluded areas and shelters with the gorse bushes, but they still attract a lot of heat as you get round to the Coast Guard hut. That is a bit more sheltered, and there's so many adders down there. It's such a high chance of seeing them.
Wow, okay, well, it'd be great if we see them, but from a distance, I'd say.
They're nice to point at.
Yes, use the binoculars.
Yeah, once you get out of binocular distance, then you're a bit too close.
But yes. Should we head over onto the grass and see what we can see over here?
It's one of these places that's a huge tourist spot. It's one of those ones that every time you type in like top 10 UK beaches, I think Rhossili will either come first or third, sort of consistently. So it's such a really nice place, and it's so popular with tourists that people don't often notice what's around here.
So currently the tide is just on its way out and it's exposing that really long stretch of sand. Yeah. But yeah, when the tide's in, our hotel room's looking out over the bay, and when the tide's in, it just looks like a regular beach.
Yeah.
And as the tide recedes, the beach just gets wider and wider. It's really quite surprising.
You don't notice how big it is until you just start looking at the people down there, and the people are like specks.
Yeah.
But you've also got the deadwood, which is almost like a shipwreck.
Yeah. I saw it as it started to be exposed yesterday, and I thought, oh, a seal's head. And then I thought, oh, no, I looked with binoculars and it was definitely wood.
Yeah.
Do you get any seals or porpoises, dolphins around these
Yes,
coasts?
so the seals breed out on Worm's Head itself. So on the rocky sides on the left hand and the furthest point, you've got the guillemots, the razorbills, the fulmars, kittiwakes as well, sort of breed that side. But then as you get to the shallower parts and the bits that are sort of closer to the water, you've got all the grey seals that breed there as well. We don't usually get common seals around here. But things like porpoises are very regular. They're sort of hugging the cliffs, so in the shallower stuff.
Oh, right, okay, so we'll keep an eye out then. What other sorts of things might we see around here?
Mammal-wise, you mainly get foxes, rabbits, maybe weasels and stoats. It's not all that great for mammals, just because it is a huge cliff top. But it is brilliant for birds and also for cetacean. So in the summer months, you get the swell out at sea, so you normally get like common dolphins out there as well. But you need like a scope, because they literally look like little specks just bobbing up and down.
Have you ever had any whales around the area?
I think historically we've had minke whales, but they're not all that common this side, because the Gower's sort of like on a point and Rhossili's on the furthest point. But then if you get to the west coast, like Cardigan, you've got the whole Irish Sea, so you have got a bigger chance there. Yeah, so I started bird watching when I was 6. So my dad built me a little bird feeder. It was out of like an old nest box that had fallen apart, so he knocked it together. I made like this little wooden house bird feeder, and I used to write down all the birds you could see in the garden. They were all in Welsh, because I didn't learn English until a bit later. We would go to bird parks and wildlife parks. Dad and my brother would go cycling or go fishing. I would sit in the tree and count all the birds I could see. So a lot of my school notebooks was, when you're older, what do you want to be? It's like, I want to cuddle ducks. That's all I want to do. I want to cuddle ducks. And then when I turned 16, I got hired by WWT as a learning assistant. So I started teaching kids, teaching schools about wildlife and wetlands, why we need wetlands, and also wildfowl. So my passion for wildfowl started there. But then since that time, I've sort of grown more and more. I've started doing radio shows, TV shows, and then being spotted by BBC and spotted by S4C. So everything has sort of just gradually got bigger and bigger. And now it's to the point where I can talk about messages. So there's a lot of stuff I'm passionate about, like bird watching, that is accessible for everyone. Everyone should be able to get out bird watching. Conserving wildlife is a huge one of mine, especially Welsh wildlife. It's sort of overlooked a little bit. So everything is in Britain, we have these and these, but you look at every one of the sites they mention and it's all Scotland and England, and it's like, well, Wales has got this as well, and we've actually got more than you do, but we're not advertised. And then the other thing is the illegal pet trade. People having pets that don't cope well with home environments. Like on the internet, you can actually buy meerkats. You should not have meerkats. You should not have single doves. Doves like to be in pairs or in groups. You can't have one dove on its own. I think it's a lot of it at the moment is you can literally, we're in such a money era that you can buy everything you want, that people aren't taking the necessary steps to look after things. It goes for the environment as well. A lot of people don't actually look after the environment as much as they should.
That's shocking about the types of animals that you can buy. I had no idea. One of the things you mentioned about the bird watching, that you're really into the wildfowl.
Yeah.
And that's something that I struggle with. so I'll be looking for some tips if we see anything around today.
I love ducks. Anything, ducks and geese. Geese are like my main thing. So when I was with WWT, we used to breed all the geese and ducks and swans, cranes, flamingos. We breed them, monitor them. I still do it, even though I'm not with WWT anymore. I'm a BTO ambassador for Carmarthenshire. So I'll sit there and I will count through as many ducks and geese as I can, monitor the juvenile to adult ratios, and then send off all that data.
On the subject of geese, I know some people have got some quite strong opinions about geese.
They're not best loved at all.
So why do you think that is?
Geese are very brilliant parents. So there's scars all over my hands and my arms, and they're all from geese. So they are the best parents. So geese have as many eggs as they can cope with. So if a mother's a first-time mother, they may not have 5 eggs, they may have 3 eggs. She knows that she's got a 1 in 3 chance of it hatching, and she can look after that one. Whereas ducks, their way is 10% or 20% of their clutch will survive. So if I have 10 eggs, maybe 2 will get to adulthood. But it's with geese, a lot of people don't like geese just because they're nasty, they hiss. But that's just because the geese, it's the same as if someone came near your children, you'd tell them off. So they just hiss at you. A lot of the time they don't bite you, they just sort of run at you and then stop.
So they're quite protective.
Yeah.
And what about swans? Because swans are quite big, powerful birds and can feel quite aggressive.
Yeah, swans are pretty bad. It's the only bird that's ever made me cry is the swan.
Oh no, what happened?
When we were catching up one of the swans, it caught me with a carpal joint in my throat.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was my own fault. Sort of trying to catch it whilst trying to shout to someone else what to do, and it just got caught awkwardly. But it's one of those ones sobbing, holding that swan. It's like, oh, you were right. And you're like, shut up, just ring it.
Oh, no.
There's so many stories. You need to have things like this where birds aren't seen as the negatives, like gulls. Everybody hates gulls. But gulls, most of them are declining. That majority of them are now on the red list in the UK. So herring gulls, lesser blackbacks, Mediterranean gulls, kittiwakes, they're all red listed. But a lot of people are just like, oh, they're vermin, they take my chips. It's like, well, if we didn't feed them in the first place, they wouldn't need to come into towns. If we just left the cliffs alone so they could nest, they wouldn't need extra places. A lot of it is human interference, and then the birds get blamed.
And the birds trying to adapt to living where the humans are also living because they don't have the space to live.
People hate starlings in their gardens. Well, they're another red-listed bird. They're like, oh, I've got hundreds in my garden. It's like, well, you may have hundreds, but the overall population is really declining. But a lot of people are just, well, I see them, so I don't need to protect them. And that's the problem we have. A lot of it was like plastic. It's like, well, me not recycling or using a plastic straw, I try to keep away from plastic as much as I can, just because I do a lot of work with rescuing animals. So I try and help out where I can with birds that have been tangled up in fishing wire out in Israel. When we were out there previously this year, there was pigeons caught on fishing wires and stuff. And it's, well, even if you don't use that one straw, but if the 3 billion people on this planet all said, well, me not making a difference, that's a lot of difference.
Yeah. So it truly is down to each individual making those choices.
Yeah.
Because the cumulative effect of those choices being made has a massive effect.
A lot of it is ignorance, that people are in their little bubbles and they like to stay in their bubbles, like, oh, it doesn't affect me, so I'm fine with it. And it's, well, it's our problem. We've caused this, so we should be the ones to sort of rectify this.
So just scanning around here at the moment, I just noticed there's a kestrel. It was just hovering over there. What else can you see as we look around?
You can see some gulls out to shore. They're herring gulls, but I can hear some meadow pipits, which they're not going to call, as I've just mentioned them. Classic birds. But normally out at the Worm's Head itself, you'll get some auks flying around, with some shags and cormorants as well. Just having a quick scan that there's no porpoises.
Yeah, we definitely want to see porpoises if there's any.
They're just some little fulmars. I say little.
When you see them close up. Have you been close to a fulmar nest?
Yes, I've been spewed on, yes.
So was that a ringing operation?
Yeah, so it was having a look at how many they've got, how many chicks have hatched. But it's one of those things that the smell gets under your skin. It's the same with silt. It's in your pores, and no matter how many times you shower that day, I think I showered 3 or 4 times and it was still there. But I think it's just the point that the smell gets in your nose and you're like, I can still smell it. It's not here, but it's here somewhere.
Now, you mentioned earlier some of the birds, well, at least one bird that's endemic to this area.
Yeah, so we've got chough. So we have red-billed chough here. Rhossili, Portainen and the smaller beaches around the Gower are some of the best places for chough. but you've also got them now back in Cornwall. But it's mainly Anglesey, North Wales, and then the Gower are the best places for chough. But I've not heard any yet. They're sort of like, they're hard to explain. They've got a really odd call, a really weird, like, hewing noise. But once you hear them, you're just like, oh, it's a chough. I can just hear a skylark calling as well.
Oh, right.
So what they normally do is they hover above, and it's part of, they sort of make that noise and they sort of dive down. It's part of their sort of breeding display.
So yesterday we heard a bird. Now I'm always learning about birds, and we heard a bird singing away and doing a sort of parachute type fall through the sky and then up again and still singing. And I've always thought that was a skylark, but my husband said he thought he'd heard something about meadow pipits doing something similar.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, this is fine. I will get my app out and I will be able to decide. And I couldn't. And I managed to get a couple of photos, a little bit blurred, but I did actually get photos of this bird while it was mid-flight. And you could quite clearly see it had white outer tail feathers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, both those birds have white outer tail feathers, so that didn't help.
The easiest way with them is meadow pipits are smaller, but they sort of sing from the throat, whereas larks sort of sing from the breast, if that makes sense. So one's normally like a deeper pitch than the other one.
Ah.
But with pipits, it's their habitat as well. They both do that parachuting display, but pipits have got smaller legs and they've also got huge hind claws on them. So if in doubt, have a look at the size of the hind claws.
I'll look out for them. Maybe we'll see some as we're going around.
The easiest way, I tend to do them by call. Even though I go out bird watching so much, a lot of the time I don't really see many birds. It's mainly done on call, listening for stuff.
I absolutely can do that with woodland birds, but I still haven't got a massive repertoire. I'm just building that up.
Yeah.
We were talking about choughs. What is it about this region for them?
It's very open, so they are they're not really considered like farmland birds, but it's mainly the cliff tops as well. You've got the greenery for the food that they eat, like the worms and the insects, but they've got the cliffs for nesting in, so choughs do like to nest either in cliffs, in little burrows, or on like the rocky caverns on the sides. So it's like Rhossili and the Gower is a bit of both, so it's the best of both worlds. Same as Anglesey and same as Cornwall, which is why they're now down in Cornwall as well. So it's good that they're not now starting to spread around, but there's still not that many of them.
Do you know roughly how many pairs there are?
In South Wales, I think we've got maybe 10 tops nesting pairs, but we really don't have that many at all. In the UK altogether, Anglesea's got a lot. There's a really good paper by Tony Cross and Andrea. They've done a brilliant paper that sort of looks at how many chough are around, the nesting productivity. Most of them in Wales, luckily, are colour ringed. They're all from that one project. So that's they're all been colour ringed. As a chick, they get colour ringed, and that's just to monitor whether the coastal populations interact with the inland populations. And the amount of research they've done, it's been going on for 30 years, I think. It's a huge paper. It's a really, really good paper. A lot of what I do on sort of Instagram is pictures, but then I started doing more of these highlights, putting in videos of me presenting small stuff, like they're only 15 seconds long, of like interesting stuff I've seen out and about, like red kites, some of the guillemots and puffins. And then out in Israel I did a lot of them, but most of my longer videos are done on YouTube. It's just a kestrel.
Oh, there's a kestrel just flying across. It's just beautiful.
Female one.
Really low down. Do you notice how it flew just a few feet over those people's heads? I don't think they even noticed it was there.
Yes, classic. It's a lot of it. It's sort of, that's like the metaphor for wildlife. People were standing there walking, one of them was on their phones, and they completely missed the kestrel that went straight over their heads.
Literally and figuratively.
A lot of people just don't do it. Like now there's, well, I can count 4 people taking pictures of the scenery, and yet there's a meadow pipit singing, there's some stone chats, there's Fulmar, and they are just taking pictures of the cliffs, which a lot of people do. I do it. I love scenic photos, but they sort of they don't even notice it at all.
Yeah, that's it. It's almost like I mean, it's possible that they are hearing and noticing, but it does seem that a lot of people are just oblivious to the nature, the animal nature around them.
Yeah.
They can see the nice views, and that seems to be where it stops. I'm just stunned still by the fact that that kestrel was probably 4 feet above their heads. It was really low, and they didn't even notice.
No. We're lucky here that we get quite a few corvids. We get the ravens, carrion crows, jackdaws and chough. But I'm not spotted any chough yet.
I did an episode recently on the corvids, and we'd just been in Banff in Canada, and I always notice when I go over to Canada that the ravens are so, I mean, it's the same species, but they're so much more comfortable with being around people.
Yeah.
And here it feels like a real treat if, well, especially as I live in an area where they don't have ravens, but it's a real treat to see them and hear them. So we're just at the edge of the cliff here looking over the sea, and there's a large number of gulls in the water.
They're common gulls and there's some herring gulls in there as well. So the common gulls are these smaller ones with almost next to no markings on the face. They're sort of very, very plain looking, but they're probably one of the cutest larger gull species. They've sort of got that perfectly round head on them as well.
And do we have rock doves around here?
We get it's mainly feral pigeons we get here. We don't have any true blood rock pigeons. There's very, very few left of them.
So do you see gannets?
Oh, we do tend to see a lot of gannets, but it's a bit awkward at the moment because you've got this sea mist that's just covering the deeper water where the gannets normally are. I feel like the gulls are off.
That was quite funny. The gulls were all on ledges on the rocks, and a particularly high wave came in and washed upwards, and they all left, and now they're sitting in the water. But it's just that I don't expect gulls to get caught out by the tide. I expect them to be able to read the tide really, really well.
What are they? They're two red-throated divers out there, just straight ahead. They're like two tiny black dots.
And how can you tell they're red-throated divers?
They're darker on the top and they've got a slight bit of white just underneath. They do look very, very black against this water now. But they've also got these long necks on them.
So I think I would have been dismissing them as cormorants, but I can see they've got white on the front, or am I looking at a cormorant?
Oh, you're looking that way.
Oh.
They're shags, they are.
Okay, so the difference between shags and cormorants, what else can you tell me about them?
They're smaller and also the head shapes are different as well. If you manage to see them at a closer distance, the beaks are different and the eyes are different as well. But when you see them at a distance, you do notice the legs are slightly hanging out a bit longer than the shags are. It's just when you watch them, they sort of fly slightly differently. Shags have got a very shallow wing beat, whereas cormorants have got a very deep one.
So we're just looking across this really stunning coastline here. Now this is full of, I'm not sure what type of rock it is, but clearly in the past sections of it have fallen off, and so we've got a very stepped, and obviously if you look at the actual edge of the cliff you wouldn't want to be standing too close because it looks like a bit could go at any time. What sort of birds might you see along a cliff line like this?
Cliff tops, especially these ones, we've got the rocks and the different steps and ledges are very good for auks, tube noses like fulmars as well, gulls, other things like cormorants and shags we use it as well. Basically all your seabirds, they all like to nest on these tier landscapes, and that's because you can fit a lot of them in one group, so they sort of feel safer as a unit as opposed to singly.
And you mentioned that peregrines nest in holes. Some of these other birds will nest on ledges. So do they actually build nests, or do they just lay their eggs on the bare rock?
Most of the time they don't fetch sort of nesting materials and form a nest like a lot of passerines do, and a lot of other birds like shags will do it. They'll put sticks and seaweeds together to form a nest thing. But most of them, because the females stay with the eggs, they just sort of sit on them. So they might have remains of what they've eaten around them and sort of poo and all that stuff, but most of the time they just sort of sit there.
Right.
But things like guillemot eggs, they're sort of formed in the shape of a pear. Because it's like a pear, it'll roll in a circle, it won't roll off.
Wow.
So they've got really specially adapted eggs. A lot of seabirds' eggs are chalky, and that chalk is like an antibacterial thing. And that's just because there's so much poo and liquid around that chalky material on the eggs is like an antibacterial master on them.
That's something I never knew. That's really interesting. So looking along this coastline now, I'm just having a quick scan. Dan's being much more brave than I am about getting close to the edge. When we came along here yesterday, we saw stonechats and whitethroats. But I understand that you can get Dartford warblers in this area too.
Rhossili's a bit awkward for them because the amount of gorse we've got is not like a landscape of gorse. But as you come out of Rhossili, you go over Kevin Bryn, which has got, it's like that open field with the big steep hill coming over. That's a really, really good place for Dartford warblers.
Aha.
The only problem is it's a very, very large area.
Oh, right.
It's a case of just listening for them and following the sound, which is a case with a lot of warblers.
Yes. Warblers are... People will know that I've said many times that warblers are actually quite challenging anyway.
Yeah.
I have great respect for people who are able to tell the warblers apart. I can tell very obvious ones, like chiff-chaff. But even that, if I see a garden warbler, for example, and it's not making a noise, I'm still not sure if it's a chiff-chaff or a garden warbler that just happens to be going through.
Garden warblers are sort of the most generic looking warbler, so they're just brown, really. If it just looks brown and boring, it's a garden warbler. But chiff-chaffs are part of the Philosk family, so they're the smaller ones. They tend to be like tree canopy birds, so they're normally sort of small and flittery, whereas garden warblers are part of the Sylvia family, so they're sort of bigger and heavier and bouncier.
Oh.
So a lot of things with birds is a lot of the time you don't have to identify them because you can just watch them and then they'll give away what they are.
That's really interesting. So I think what we've already learned today then is listening for birds, looking at their behaviour, and then noting, I guess, the sort of main characteristics, like you mentioned about the difference between the cormorants and the shag.
With bird identification, a lot of people try to learn exactly what the bird is, whereas the way I learnt was to pick 2 or 3 features from something. So if it's not got those 3 features, it's not what I think it is. Like something like a stonechat, it should have like an orangey breast, it should have a white collar, and it should have a black head. If it hasn't got those 3, it might be a female, but if it's still not got the white collar and the orangey flanks on it, then it's not a stonechat, so it could be a pipit. And then you go through the pipit, so it's got a streaky breast and a white outer tail feathers and the white sort of belly area. If it hasn't got them, then you go through what else it could be. But the easiest way is just to learn like 2 or 3 features and just start off with like 5 birds from one family. So like 5 seabirds, and then broaden it to 6 seabirds and 7. That's the way I started off. I learnt 10 garden birds, and then when it wasn't one of them, then I'd have to look it up what it was.
Right.
Because you can't be an expert in a day. So
No, that's really, really interesting. Well, I just saw a former fly past. So hopefully we'll see one again in a minute, and you can tell us a bit more about what's special about formers. That would be really helpful with the seabird thing, because I think I know herring gulls, but the thing with gulls is they have these like annual plumages until they get to adulthood.
yeah, so gulls take about 4 years to get to adulthood. So it's only after that 4th year or that 4th molt cycle that they actually get that classic adult grey-back, or maybe even not a grey-back, white plumage. But that's only for like your Larsus gulls, which are the large species, your herring gulls, greater blackback gulls, lesser blackback gulls, and common gulls. Then you've got your white wingers as well. Tell me right, it'll go. Dunnocks are probably the most prolific breeders. So one male would mate with a number of females and then just abandon them and let them crack on.
Oh, what's that?
So that is a linnet. So linnets are sort of, the males feel like a pinkish breast on them and a grey head, but they're very heavily streaked, and they, as they're part of the finch family, they sit bolt upright, whereas the females are very streaky and very pale, so you might confuse them with meadow pipits. But as meadow pipits are pipits, they sort of sit with their bodies lower down, whereas linnets sit bolt upright.
It really is pretty. We're looking out on pale blue sort of lagoony bits where the tide has gone out and exposed the causeway. The sky is blue and the grass is green and the colours are quite vibrant.
Yeah.
That could be something to do with my sunglasses, of course, but
Every time you come here, there's birds everywhere. Most of the time it is you've got your gulls and your seabirds, but there's always birds. No matter where you're standing, there's always the sound of dunnocks or meadow pipits or gulls. There's always something.
And we can hear some herring gulls in the distance doing a classic seaside call.
You can see them all over the rocks there looking for the starfish. It's quite sad when you're trying to have a look at the different species of starfish we get here. The Wildlife Trust, the Living Seas and all them, the National Trust as well. You'll see them picking up starfish, looking at the species, putting them back, and you watch the gulls just following you. Just watching what you're doing.
So we can see, I think, those jackdaw over on the edge. Are they crows?
They are carrion crows.
Yeah.
Still no chuff.
So have you actually seen them on this little stretch before, or just in this region?
No, see them on this stretch quite often. But the problem we've got is that they start breeding this time of year. The chough don't nest on these cliff tops. They nest further back. So they may have gone there, or they rotate between here, Portainan and Oxwich. So the same chough sort of rotate between them, but what we've noticed today is that it is very busy with tourists.
Yeah.
They're quite shy birds. They're not as confident as some of the other corvids.
We had a swallow that just flew past, and yesterday was the first swallow I'd seen of the year.
Yeah.
When we arrived at the hotel, there was a small magazine, and I noticed that you had an article in the magazine all about swallows. Oh, you get sand martins here as well?
Yeah, we get quite a few in sort of South Wales area, particularly Swansea. So Bay Magazine is sort of like Swansea region. So a lot of the rivers we've got, they're quite high-sided rivers, especially up the north end of Swansea, that the rivers do have nesting swallows, and they do have nesting sand martins as well. So we're quite lucky that we get a nice diverse amount of wildlife here, especially with houndines and swifts as well. But we're quite lucky in South Wales. We've got the Cardiff Swift Project and the Glamorgan Swift Project. So if anyone wants to look at it online, essentially it's now going up. They've got this huge tower. It's like a circle of all boxes put together, and it's like this huge stick tower that goes up in the sky. And there's so many boxes on buildings around Cardiff that the new tower's going up in Glamorgan, that we are doing everything we can for swifts as well.
That is amazing. This sounds perfect because swifts like to be in a colony.
They're really good, and they've got a speaker in the main hub of it, so you don't need a speaker on each box.
Oh, wow.
So it's just one big hub. But that's the thing with designated projects. A lot of people don't know where to start.
No.
This year RSPB are doing a lot for swifts, so you can put up a swift box. A couple of years ago they did it for starlings, put up a starling box. BTO did the Tony Owl survey. Having designated projects makes a lot more inclusive for everybody of all abilities, and whether you're a good bird watcher or average or just wanting to start out, whether you can't do these surveys because of disabilities, they're all inclusive and they're all something that everyone can do.
When I was speaking to Mark Carwadine a couple of episodes ago, and he was also helping me to understand how to get involved in conservation by, you know, even if you just pick one thing you're interested in, but donate time, donate effort, just get to know that one thing. You don't have to save the whole world, but by saving all these individual parts, if we're all working together, gradually that will make a big difference.
That's the thing, you can't change the world by yourself, but you can do your little bit to help something like in your garden, if you're quite into gardening and you're into birds as well, just planting maybe sunflowers that look very pretty but also are very good for birds. Same as lavender's very good for moths, which in turn is very good for bats. And then you've got your other ones like honeysuckle, which are good for bees, that everyone can do little bits. It's just little changes you can make. Whereas I love gardening, I love being out in the garden, but all the plants I buy are wildlife friendly, so it's like the best of both worlds. You're helping wildlife, but you're also doing what you like. It's the same as when you go out for walks. Take a pair of binoculars with you, or even just take a notebook and record what wildlife you see. There's loads of apps these days that they take your grid reference of where you're standing and you just tick boxes of what you can see. Butterfly Conservation have got a nice one. iRecord have got one, BTO have got one, that you just sit there and you type in, like I'm looking at a dunnock, and then it uploads it to the national database. So there's so much stuff that you don't need to be an expert for, because some days when you're working in bird watching, like what I do with surveys and stuff, some days you want to go birding, but you don't want it to be work. You just want a nice quiet day bird watching. And those apps are what I like, because I'm still doing my bit to record wildlife. But you're not
having to do the full-on...
Yeah.
Yeah, the full-on survey.
It's not just, I've had enough now, I'm going to go to the chip shop, I'm going to have some food. But I'll still sit there and say, I can see 4 herring gulls from the cafe window. Then I'll upload it to the bird track database, just 4 herring gulls from the Rhossili Bay car park. Yeah.
Fantastic. Just looking across the sort of exposed rock now, I can see quite a few gulls moving around. Just wondered if there might be any waders as well out there.
There's normally quite a few oyster catchers around this area. So South Wales is very, very good for oyster catchers. The Bury Inlet, which is where I live in on the border between Llanelli and Gorsainon on the inlet. That area we get about 5,000 to 10,000 oyster catchers every winter.
Oh my goodness.
It's just like a sea of them. It's amazing. And then every year they get caught up. So you take between 1 and 5% of the total number, and then you ring them. But you also have a look at where they're coming from. So whilst we've been doing that, we found birds from Sweden, from Iceland. There's been some Scottish birds that have been ringed and come back to us. So you can sort of see the movements between the species as well, like where they're breeding from. So I'm quite good friends with some other teams that do the ringing of them in other countries. There's a project in Iceland where they're ringing them in Iceland, and we've recorded some of those coloured ring birds here. So you can see their migration routes, you can see where they're going to and from.
Wow. Gosh, that's an amazing number though.
Yeah. So we are Ramsar site, I think, for them. We may have lost that now, I'm not sure. The Bury Inlet is a Ramsar site for a number of species as well.
So what is that you mentioned there? What sort of site is that?
Ramsar is a site of international importance for certain species. So I think the Bury Inlet did once have it for 5 species, but it shifts quite a lot with the numbers are being so protected in other areas that sites are now losing it because the site have now got more than you, so it's sort of you hand it over to someone else.
Right, okay.
So it's right, well, we've got 10,000 but you've got 15,000, so now you take that protection to protect your site, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's another good site for dark-bellied Brent geese, which I just love to sit and watch for hours. So they've got, they're pretty much all black, but underneath the black goes to their throat, their neck and to the breast. And then it's white on the behind, so all Brent geese have got those white behinds. Dark bellies are the most generic ones we get here. And then you've got your light-bellied or pale-bellied Brent geese, and that's sort of got a grey underneath instead of a black underneath.
Oh, right.
But if they've got very, very long white sides and a very thick white collar, like it's sort of your finger length, and black underneath, they're black brants, but they're the rarer version that you get. So Brent geese, we normally get 3 types here. See,
and I would not have known that at all. I would have just looked at them and thought, oh right, okay, geese.
Yeah.
But it's this thing about you were saying earlier about knowing a few types, but then once you can learn those, you can spread out from that.
Yeah.
So I would have gone, right, geese, okay, probably, I don't know, Brent geese, but I wouldn't have known that there were the different types without looking further. Yeah, so if you were to come here in the winter, what kind of birds would you be seeing? Because it looks like this is quite a nice lagoony bit. I can imagine there'd be a lot of waders.
Yes, we do get a lot of waders here. Wintertime we'll get more ducks out at sea, so the common scorters come back, long-tailed ducks, surf scorters, velvet scorters, and the divers will be out here as well. But for the most part it's sort of the same type of birds. They just don't look as pretty because they're in winter plumage.
Well, I guess it's probably a bit exposed in the winter as well, so it might not be as fun to...
It is sort of 3 coats colder than inside a Swansea.
Should we have a look along this cliff and just see what else might be out there?
The tide's really gone out now.
It really has, hasn't it? Gosh. And there's a really shallow water now where the the sea's going out and there's lots and lots of white birds in the water. Just going to have a little scan and see if it's still the same mix of birds that we saw earlier. Would you say they're still the common gulls and herring gulls?
Yeah, you can see the size difference between them. The herring gulls are roughly the same colour as the common gulls, but they've got that oval shaped head on them and the longer beak, but they look stockier compared to the common gulls, which are a bit further out. They just have that cute round circular head, and they look a lot more compact as well.
That's brilliant, because I do find it quite daunting sometimes to look at gulls, because they can be so...
All pretty much look the same.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you get kittiwakes along here as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what kittiwakes look like?
Kittiwakes are some of the nicest gulls. To me, it's my favourite species of gull, other than Mediterranean gull. But they're sort of completely white with thick black wingtips. So your black-headed gulls have got little white edges to them, whereas the kittiwakes have got long black sort of wedges on the side of them. But they make that classic kittiwake noise as well, so they're quite easy to spot just because they start shouting every time they're around you as well. So we mainly have them here on Mumbles Pier, which is the biggest colony in the south for them.
Oh, really?
So it's one of the nicest places to go, because you just walk along the pier and you've got kittiwakes all around you on ledges and everything.
And they make the sound, don't they? They actually say kittiwake.
Yeah.
Kittiwake, kittiwake.
Yeah.
I love it.
A lot of birds are named after their names. Common gulls, their other name is mew gulls, because they make that mew noise.
And what about chuffs?
Chuff, make the chuff noise. Chiff chaff, make the chuff chaff noise.
And jackdaws, I understand, is sort of from the jack
yeah
noise, apparently.
That's one I've never really understood, because it's jackdaw, whereas
yes, okay, yeah, that bit messes it up.
Yeah, they just sort of make like a cack noise.
Yeah. I was just going to have a quick look on the beach at those birds. So once again, I want to be able to spot myself and say, is that a common gull? So there's a great black-backed gull out there.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of those. Well, I know as well, we had fulmars yesterday, and I think we've seen one or two already today. What's different about a fulmar than a gull?
Fulmar isn't a gull, so a fulmar is a tube nose. So it's sort of looks similar, apart from they got the nostrils really prominent on top and they have a shorter beak. But also, I think, there you go, there's a herring gull and a common gull next to each other. You can see the shape of the heads with the shadows on them. You've also got the windows on their primaries as well. So the windows are those little white spots.
Oh yeah.
So common gulls have got less than herring gulls as well. But the easiest way to see with them is that it is a little bit smaller. Herring gulls have got like a squinted eye, red on the beak. Common gulls normally have like a clean coloured beak. They almost look like they have little chubby cheeks and little round eyes, and a smaller beak.
Out for that. One thing I want to ask you, looking across here, so we've got this really, really broad beach. I mean, that's going to be like half a mile or so. It's really, if you were going to walk from the coast out to the sea, you've got a long walk.
Yeah.
But looking along the stretch of beach, it's just absolutely amazing. And there's like another little island. Is that another causeway at the end?
Yeah.
There?
So this is Rhossili Beach.
Right.
And then you've got Mewslade as well. So this goes all the way around to that point where it's like a small little island. I don't often go up there, but basically all of Wales is surrounded by the Welsh coastal path. So you can walk from the bridge in Newport all the way around to Flint. Up there is one long path that you can walk. So at the Gower, you can start off in Mumbles and you can walk all the way around to Rhossili. So if people fancy like a week's holiday, you can walk between all the beaches. So it is really nice, especially if you want to get all manners of wildlife. Like Rhossili is good for birds and porpoises, but Botainan is the better place for dolphins because it's more open and more sort of deeper water, that area.
Dan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really wonderful walking around this peninsula with you. We've seen quite a lot of species and you've told us about quite a few more that we could see, so I shall keep my eyes open over the next few days. Where can people find you if they want to find you online?
My main platforms are Twitter and Instagram, which are at Dan E. Rouse. They're the main ones that I use most of the time, but I do have Facebook as well, which my Facebook page isn't that great. So it's better to find me on those two, or my website, which is danrouse.org.uk, and it's got everything I do, my Instagram, my Twitter on that, what's coming up, and you can also find out events that I'll be doing talks or guided walks or just generally going to be at as well.
I highly recommend visiting Rhossili Headland. It's managed by the National Trust, and while you have to pay for parking, unless you are a National Trust member, access to the headland is free. There are stunning views, easy access with a level cliff-top path, and a great variety of birds and other wildlife found there. I had a fantastic walk with Dan and learned lots about the birds and other wildlife. Dan also shared tips on gardening for wildlife and some ingenious recycling ideas, but you'll have to wait for a future episode for these. What birds have you seen recently? I love to hear about them. Join our Facebook group to share your photos and tales of the birds you've seen. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Birder Podcast. There is a podcast page which you can also follow, but the group is where people are able to post photos and talk about the birds they see. It's a closed group for listeners of the show, and you do have to answer a couple of questions to join, but they're very easy ones. Each Wednesday, I post a fun bird ID quiz on my social media channels. Do look out for that. Follow me on Twitter at Casual Birder Pod or on Instagram at Casual Birder Podcast. You can email me at casualbirderpod@gmail.com. And do visit my website at casualbirder.com. You can find photos and videos of the birds I've seen and blog posts about my birding. Make sure you don't miss any episodes by subscribing to the show. Subscribing is free and you can do it wherever you listen. Thank you to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder Podcast.